Hello everyone, welcome to the programming session on interfaces and I've got here the code that I was using for the abstract class vehicle and I got rid of most of the stuff here, but I've left this method because it's anyways abstract and abstract methods are all we can have in an interface. So what I'm going to do right now is get rid of these two because as I said, public and abstract are implicit in case of an interface. So I'll get rid of that, and the way to make an interface is just write interface here instead of abstract class, and let me just have another method, say boolean start. And start would be different for car and bicycle because a car may start using an ignition key, a bicycle will start by pedaling, and in case we made other vehicles such as a bike, let's say, it would probably have a kickstart. So the start method would be different for each vehicle, but what I want to assert here is that anything that's a vehicle must have a start method. So I'll go to my car class, and like you can see here, I've changed this from extends to implements because vehicle is an interface, and I've got a constructor here. Also, in the last session, I said that abstract classes can have constructors. So there's another difference between interfaces and abstract classes. Interfaces cannot have constructors. And here I've got public int calculate maintenance cost, and I'm going to leave this method as it is. And as you can see here, I need the public keyword here because in case of interfaces, the public is implicit. The access modifier of methods is implicit, but in case of classes, it's not. So I would have to explicitly mention public here, and I'll have to have another method, a public boolean start, and let's say inside this I do if fuel greater than 0, just do a system dot out dot println and say start by ignition, and if it's not, then do a system dot out dot println and say could not start, low fuel, and I need to do a return true here and a return false here. So the boolean that I'm returning is whether it started successfully or not. So that's the method here, and let me just leave the bicycle class as it is. I've changed this to implements, and let me not make a start method here, and let's go to our test class and do car equals new car, and bicycle equals new I've misspelled bicycle here, new bicycle, and let me just do a Java C test here. And as you can see, I'm getting an error. It says bicycle is not abstract and does not override abstract method start in vehicle. So it clearly says that vehicle has a start method, and anything that's a vehicle needs to have a start method. So you don't have a start method here. I can't accept that. However, I could make this thing abstract, and now it won't give me an error, although I'll have to remove this. And now I can go into this and do Java C test, and as you can see, it compiled fine. And let me just go back to the way it was, and I'll make this concrete because we would want the bicycle class to be concrete, and I should do a public boolean start, And within the start method, let me just do a system.out.println, and I'll do a start by peddling, and this will let me just return true always. I'm not going to look at the air in the tires and all. I'm just going to skip that. But now I should not have the same error. And yeah, as you can see, it compiled fine. And I can do something like car, car dot start, and I can do something like bicycle dot start. And if I compile this again and do a Java test, I get start by ignition and start by pedaling. So that's one thing that I wanted to show you about interfaces. And the other thing that I wanted to show was implementing multiple interfaces. So let me just make another file and save this as wheeled vehicle.java. So not all vehicles need to be wheel vehicles. I can have boats or something that do not have wheels. So I'll make a separate interface, wheeled vehicle, and let's say I just have a boolean change, change type, and for simplicity now I'm just going to have a public boolean change tire with a system.out.println, and I'll do changed. That's it for now, and this will return true. And I'm going to copy this method right here into my bicycle class. So I'll just leave it like this for now, but obviously in real world scenarios the changing tire procedure may be different for car and bicycle. But now this car class will implement vehicle as well as wheeled vehicle, and similarly for the bicycle class, so wheeled vehicle. And let me just clear this, and java seed test.java and java test. So it gave us the same results because I never called the change tire method, but I could do it. Let's say car.change tire and bicycle dot change tire, and let me just compile and run again. So I get change 2 times, so it's working. And a very interesting thing comes up here. So what if we have members with the same name? So like I said, all fields here are public, static and final. So I just do a int test equals 10 here, and within the wheel vehicle I do int test equals 5, and within car, let's say within the change tire I do a system, or actually let me just add it here, plus test, and let me compile now. So it gave me an error. It says the reference to test is ambiguous because both variable test in vehicle and variable test in wheeled vehicle match. So doing something like this gives me an error. But of course, there's a simple way to get around it. I can do a vehicle dot test, and let me just do a plus and a space in between and plus wheeled vehicle dot test, and if I compile it now, it compiles fine, and I get changed followed by a 10 followed by a 5. So it's working fine. But what if we had something like a start method here which did not return anything? So void start. What do I do now? Because my car class needs to implement the start method, but I can't do I can't have a return type of boolean as well as void. I'll have to have one of those. And as you can see, the parameters being passed in case of vehicles, we have no arguments being passed. In case of wheeled vehicle, we have no argument passed. So when the method binding happens, method binding basically refers to which method is to be called. So if I had two methods here, if I had something like a public void start, and in that case there would be an ambiguity as to which method needs to be called when we do car.start with no arguments, and hence that's not allowed at all. So if we have fields with if we have methods with the same signature, and the signature of a method is just the name and the return types. So if we have methods with the same signature but different return types in two different interfaces, then there's no way that a class can implement both of those interfaces. So that's one thing that we'll have to take care of. And I think this sums up how to make interfaces, how we can implement interfaces. And another thing that I think mentioning this would be fine, but I could have also done something like extends vehicle. So this just means that wheel vehicle extends the vehicle interface, and in that case I could remove this part here, and I could return this here. And now what happens is I can have just test here. Let me just get rid of all of this actually. Um, and this time if I have just test, let me see what happens. Java C test.java, and alright, I've got okay this issue right here. I made the start method. Let me just clear this out, and Java C test.java and Java test. So it says changed 5. So it's the test variable from the wheeled vehicle class that got printed when I did test. And of course I could do something like vehicle.test, and that would get me a 10. But saying just test gives me the field in the subclass. So that's one thing to remember, that I talked about variable hiding in one of the videos. So when we make a hierarchy of interfaces, the field in the superclass gets hidden by the one in the subclass. So that's just another point that you'll have to remember. And it's just best to not create fields with the same name in two different interfaces. Just have different names for them. So I think this sums up how to make interfaces and use interfaces. I'll see you next time then.